Hey everyone, thank you so much for taking a look at this. I'll be as brief as I can, but what I want to do is walk you through a few slides that I have for a presentation that I'll be giving soon. And really, I guess more importantly, it's less about the presentation. It's more about some visualizations that I've created. Some of you, I imagine, are familiar with jobs to be done. Some of you, this may be the first time you're hearing about it. So either way, welcome. Thanks again for watching. So a job to be done, as we think of it, is it's a process. It's a process that people go through when they're trying to achieve some sort of transformation in their life, but they're unable to make that transformation because something is blocking them and preventing them from achieving that transformation. And the reason that this is important to us is that the old way of marketing and improving products had to do with the focus on the product. And if we can, and the assumption being that if we can improve the quality of the product, if we can just add one more blade to this razor, or if we can somehow make it better, cheaper, and faster, that we will have innovated the product and growth will follow. That's a perfectly valid way of doing product development. I don't have any issue with it, but I do want to present an alternative. And then the jobs to be done movement, the focus is less on the product and it's more about looking at how we can improve the customer. How's the customer trying to change? What's this life transformation that they're trying to achieve? And then we build and market products to help them make that progress or achieve that transformation. So if we're going to move from quality thinking to jobs thinking, we need a new way to do that, right? We need new mental models to help us think about markets. We need new data models to help us gather data and understand what these jobs, what these transformations are, what these constraints are. And then we also need new research methods in order to help us gather that data and make some sense of it. And I want to really talk specifically about the mental model for the rest of this presentation. So I want you to think of jobs to be done. And by the way, I will use the term job to be done and demand almost interchangeably. To us, jobs to be done is just a way of thinking about demand. And our observation has been that demand is not a thing that just exists that responds mechanically to price. Demand is really a process, or it's a chemical reaction. And the way that I tend to think of it is almost as hydrogen and oxygen coming together to form water. So the way that we think about it, the different elements that we see coming into demand are, first of all, desires. And this is what describes that transformation that people are trying to achieve, what they want to become or how they want their future to be different. Right? So we look at different types of desires. There's a typology of it. And sometimes people desire more control, sometimes they desire more recognition, or they want to care for the people that are around them. And we can look at people through the lens of these types of desires that they have, and sometimes we can give them better names. But ultimately, the desire is the first thing that must exist. People have to want something different for themselves in the future. Also, if we could just be whatever we want to be and there's nothing getting in the way of doing that, then we don't look to a product for help. So the second thing we need to look at are habits and anxieties and competence, things that get in the way of us achieving the desires that we need. And that competence one, I think, is important because sometimes we maybe want to have some sort of a change in our life, but we just simply don't know how to do it. Sometimes we have habits, just old ways of doing things that get in the way, or maybe we have an anxiety about what the future would actually be like, and that blocks us, or maybe the anxiety is about our ability to do it at all. But we need to understand those things, because when demand gets created, usually a big component of the demand is not just what we want, but it's what's getting in the way of us getting what we want. And then the final thing are catalysts. We could all think of a million things right now that we wish were different about our life and the constraints that are blocking us from realizing that. But until some sort of a catalyst happens and gives energy to that, we are never going to change. So the next thing we need to look at for when we think about demand are what are those things that the customer experiences that cause them to say, I need to make a change now. And maybe those catalysts, that'll help us understand why they didn't buy the product 6 months ago, or why they didn't wait 6 more months to buy the product, or never buy it at all. The catalysts are the things that make the desires and constraints important and meaningful, and it gives energy to actually spark the transformation. And so what will happen is when those things come together, they make something new. And so, just the same way that hydrogen and oxygen come together and form water, desires, constraints, and catalysts come together and they form a job to be done. This is that desire for a transformation or demand for a product. And this is great. This works. We've in our work seen this repeated over and over and over in individuals that we've interviewed and studied. But the thing about a job to be done is just understanding one person's demand does not help us make a product. What we need to do is we actually need to identify patterns of demand. We need to identify patterns of catalysts, constraints, and desires coming together. And when we can start to find some patterns, we can actually think about markets in a whole new way. And we can see markets as customer behavior that is very predictable, that can be very easy to reproduce, and that can help us find new ways of selling our product and improving our product and getting them to buy it. So that's the gist of the idea that I wanted to share. This first thing was one way of visualizing it. I did have a second, slightly different way of visualizing it, and I'll just share that with you now without going through the whole presentation. So in this case, we're using triangles. And the triangles, again, come together and something new is formed. And the constraints and catalysts and desires cease to exist on their own and they become one thing. And then, of course, we are more concerned about a market. And this one isn't quite done because I just wanted to get some feedback on it. So really appreciate you taking a look at this. Hopefully you found it interesting, helpful. I would love to hear if you did find it interesting and helpful. I would also love to hear if you found it that you did not enjoy your last few minutes, or if you had some sort of an issue with the visualizations or any kind of feedback. Love it, hate it, would love to hear it. I have thick skin and I welcome your feedback.